So hi everybody, I'm Patrice Ettinger. I'm here to do some introductions. I'm the Chief Privacy Officer at Pfizer, and I have the privilege of working with IAPP to start up Women Leading Privacy. So I get to do these really important things like introduce our speakers today. So you all know today's session is about women on boards of directors. And the idea for this session really came out of the fact that not only is getting women onto corporate boards a really hot issue today, but also we have a really unique set of experience amongst the women here at IAPP, experience in privacy and experience in information security, which really are areas that boards are focused on now, worried about security, worried about GDPR, worried about all these things that didn't used to be board level issues and now are. So we thought it was really a great idea for women here to start thinking about what that might mean for them at any stage of their career, not just people who might be board ready, but people who might want to do this 10 years from now, 20 years from now. And so we are so excited to have a really great panel here for you today. So first of all, I'm going to introduce our moderator, Avani Desai. Avani is a principal and the executive vice president at Schellman. She has 15 years of experience in IT, risk management, compliance, and privacy. And her primary focus is on emerging healthcare issues and privacy concerns for organizations. Then we have two folks who are not part of our privacy community and who we're really thrilled to have here today. So starting first on my left with Alice Korngold. Alice's areas of expertise are corporate governance and sustainability. She provides strategy, advisory services, and facilitates leadership. Sorry, the print is a little too small without my glasses. Okay, we're going to fix that so I get that right. Okay. Okay, I'm going to start that again. So Alice provides strategy, advisory services, and facilitates leadership strategy retreats for board members and executives from multinational corporations, professional services firms, and global, national, and regional nonprofits. She has trained and placed several hundred business executives and professionals on not-for-profit boards. And so we're very happy to have you here today, Alice. And then to Alice's left, we have Sheila Ronning. So Sheila is a pioneer and visionary when it comes to thinking about women on boards. So long before women on boards was a hot topic, Sheila was focused on women's ability to serve on corporate boards. And she became the founder and CEO of Women in the Boardroom. So today she's one of the nation's top leadership and board service experts, and Sheila excels at connecting influential women executives and professionals with the people and tools that they need to succeed, both in business and in the boardroom. And she is a regular speaker on topics ranging from women in boards to excelling as a female leader. And Sheila has spoken at all kinds of really fabulous places and been featured in publications like the Wall Street Journal, the Washington Post, and Huffington Post. And so I'm going to turn this right over to them so you can hear from the experts on this and turn it over to Avani as our moderator. Thank you all very much.
Well, thank you, everyone. And all I can say is, wow, I'm very excited to be here today. Times are changing, and what today's session is, we're not going to focus on quotas or percentages of how many women are on boards and so forth. We're going to really focus on the positive of how this pendulum has swung, and it's now all organizations are talking about women in boards. So by a show of hands, how many of you actually have read or seen The Fearless Girl on Wall Street? No. Right? Yeah. Well, that was exciting. So on March 8th, which was International Women's Day, it really started heightening our senses of organizations like State Street Global Advisors wanted to see women on board. So that's what we're going to focus on today, and having Alice and Sheila here on what steps we can take as women to be board ready and to get board leadership. So also just quickly so we understand, how many current women are on non-for-profit boards? Great. How about for-profit boards? And how many want to be on for-profit or non-for-profit boards?
Let's split it out. Just split it out.
Oh. You want to split it out?
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
How many want to be on non-for-profit boards? How many want to be on for-profit boards? Great. Yeah, me too.
Right.
Well, great. So, Alice, so we hear quite often, the path to corporate board leadership sometimes starts from the non-for-profit board leadership. And I can tell you from my personal experience, I know that I want to be on a corporate board, but I didn't know kind of the fundamentals. I didn't know about board governance. I didn't even know how board meetings were run. So I decided to learn about the governance and also share with my passion of women and children and start by a non-for-profit. And I did. I started learning about, what board packages were and, what board governance was. So can you give us your thoughts on how women can get on non-for-profit boards?
Terrific.
And some of just the in-depth of non-for-profit boards?
Thank you. It's so terrific to be here and so thrilled to see the room packed. We hoped, but this is beyond, I think, our wildest expectations. And I love seeing all the hands raised for interest in nonprofit and for-profit boards. Let me keep an eye on the time too also. Okay, so because Sheila has a lot to say and I'm sure you have lots of questions and
Always.
comments.
Yeah.
So first of all, there's a tremendous opportunity for women in particular, for men and women, but I think this is particularly special and important for women to develop as leaders through nonprofit board service. And for those who have served on nonprofit boards, it can be a transformational experience. It is the first time that you're among a group of peers fully accountable for the mission and the implementation of the organization's work. And it gives you a different view of the world entirely. The people that I work with and place on boards, they're changed from the experience. For the first time, they really can relate to what it means for either a company or a nonprofit, for any entity, to be on the governing board and the responsibility and the accountability and the exit and the ethics and crisis management, all of the implications of being on a nonprofit, of being on a board of directors. I also want to talk about finding the right board, being an effective nonprofit board member, and the extent to which nonprofit board service could potentially be useful on the path if you're interested in for-profit boards. So finding the right nonprofit board is a critical issue. And as was mentioned earlier, I've trained and placed several hundred business executives and professionals on nonprofit boards. I spend months, sometimes a year or two, with each candidate. And I start with the premise, we're not done until you fall in love and they think you're the greatest thing that ever happened to them. And most of the people I place wind up in leadership positions, often chairs of boards and certainly officers and chairs of committees. And the key is this, everyone says, well, you have to be passionate about the issue. Absolutely. But most people have many, many interests. I've worked with candidates, there's often a zigzag in the process where they start with one thing and then say, I don't know if that's actually really what I want to do. And I love that because it's a journey. It's like, okay, what are we going to look at next, And they often wind up somewhere they didn't think they might be interested in. And sometimes it's more a match of that person to the right culture, all kinds of fit issues. But here's the biggest factor. Just about everyone I interview from the beginning says, I want to be useful. I want to add value. And that is the key. Because if you're useful, you will have a phenomenal experience. And that is where you will grow and you will shine and develop as a leader and develop skills you will bring back to work. And yes, on the path to either bigger, fancier boards, if that's what you want, for-profit boards. And I will get to that because it's certainly far from a guarantee. But it is like a parallel career path to your job. If you think about volunteer service in all of its forms, and then nonprofit board service, many people start on the boards of smaller organizations and then move up depending on what your interests are. So when I said the key is the opportunity to add value, what that means is looking at missions and programs is very nice and very important. But most importantly, you want to understand what the challenges and the opportunities are facing each organization that you might consider. So one of the first questions when I'm assessing a nonprofit and their board needs is to understand their revenue model, which if you don't have me working with you, you can look on GuideStar and find their 990s, and it will give you a pretty good idea. And then the next question, so what are they trying to accomplish? What's the revenue model to get there? And then for nonprofits, and business people are almost always very surprised at how complex they are compared to for-profits. But the revenues are a mix of government, philanthropy, fees for services, a whole smorgasbord with all kinds of different timing and expectations. It's complicated. And that, as I said, is often surprising to business people who serve on nonprofit boards. And every organization, like every company, has its challenges. So don't be afraid of that. The issue is going in with your eyes wide open. Know what you're getting in for. So one is, what are they trying to accomplish? What's the revenue model to get there? And then, who is already on the board? So you can tell a lot about an organization, same with a company, with anything, by looking at who's on the board. If they're very dependent on corporate philanthropy, but the board is all community activists, that's going to be a tough situation. Doesn't mean you don't do it, but you need to understand what they need from you and think about how realistic. I would say I do not introduce people to boards. I don't even consider boards where the CEO isn't really excellent, because then you're not going to really be able to use your time productively. It can be really frustrating. So I think that's a major factor. So finding the right board, nonprofit board, it is a journey and it is fun. And we agreed we'd talk about action steps, and I can talk a little bit more later. But first thing is, talk to people. My family says I'm obsessed with volunteer service and nonprofit boards, and then I can go on and on, even in family situations, like, oh my God, there she goes. But when I'm at parties or events, to me, the icebreaker question is what kind of service people are involved in. And first of all, people light up when they talk about the nonprofits they're involved in. And if it's a board, then it's a really juicy conversation. And again, people get excited, but you will learn about so many different organizations and board experiences from people just by starting to ask those questions. You'll be surprised at how many people do serve, and you'll start to get the hang of it, and you could learn about an opportunity. And learning from someone who's on a board is very helpful, because as I said, it's a matter of going in with your eyes wide open. Okay, looking at the time. Okay, being an effective nonprofit board member. Okay, this is really important. Obviously, you're not going to do it unless you really want to do a good job. And that's important for your own satisfaction, but also it's a reflection on you and your firm, the extent to which you perform well. So there really is no point unless you're going to. And what that means, you can find all kinds of lists of what the role of a board is. Hiring the CEO, strategy, mission, etc. Okay, I have kind of a variation on the theme, which is what I proselytize, which is this. Oversight is critical. Many attorneys in this room, oversight is absolutely essential. If you don't fulfill that responsibility as a board, the organization's in serious jeopardy. In the olden days, I said, the New York Times test. Now it's social media and it's a flash. It's trouble and hard to recoup from that. But if that's all that a board does, you haven't advanced the ball. So you want, in the next 3 to 5 years, with your fellow board members, to look back and say, hey, look what we accomplished. So in order to do that, it means working with the CEO as a board, and this is the consulting work I do, to envision an organization's greater potential. So you know the mission, the compelling value you add, but when you look out to the future, where do you want this organization to be? And the CEO can be very helpful to you in understanding the landscape. So it could be expanding, but it could be narrowing your focus. It could be expanding geographically or programmatically. It will definitely involve strategic alliances. I hardly know a nonprofit that isn't involved, and it's a great way to enrich offerings. So envision what the greater potential is. That's number one. Number two, what's the revenue model to maximize success? And that's key, because a vision is meaningless without that. And as business people, we understand that. And as I said, it's a real mix of, it's like a patchwork quilt of revenue opportunities, and it's a matter of figuring out how do we maximize success. Then, based on that, what is the role of the board, not the CEO and the staff, the board, to maximize success based on the vision and revenue model? Then what are we expecting of ourselves as individuals? And, that gets into the give-get, certainly into attendance at meetings. And you don't have to have a universal give-get, but you might have a guideline, and you might know, and that gets to composition. So you want the vision, the revenue model, role of the board, this specific board, not generic, but what do we need to do to make this happen? And then expectations, and then most importantly, board composition. Okay, I'm going to be up soon in my time, and we'll have much more time to talk. But board composition is critical. So if you're going to build a team of 10 people, you don't say, oh, let me go find 10 people who like what we do. You have an idea of what you're looking for. So once you understand the vision, the revenue model, the role of the board, then you can say, what is the mix? What is the diversity of skills, experience, expertise, networks, relationships? What do we need? What's the smallest group that can accomplish this job, and what does it look like? And then think about who you have, who fits in, and who is on the board who no longer can produce in terms of where you're going next. Thank them, celebrate them. They need to move off, but it's because you're at a new stage for the organization. And then you identify and recruit the people you need to fill out this picture of ideal board composition. The next is the committee structure, board meeting agendas, everything aligned with what you're trying to accomplish as a board to maximize the organization's success. So that's really the way I would lay it out. The final point, and I can elaborate on any of this, is the extent to which nonprofit board service might potentially be useful in paving the way for a private or public company board. I wrote an article, I thought I had copies to bring, but I didn't have reprints, but it's online. It's called Amassing Your Governance Capital. And I interviewed lots of CEOs and board chairmen of companies and search firms, et cetera, et cetera. And what was clear, it has a lot of really good stories and lessons. What's clear is being on a nonprofit board, as Sheila will tell you, does not promise you a place ultimately on a for-profit board, but there is no one who's on a private or public company board that has not served on nonprofit boards, not a one. And this is what every chairman told me, this is what every CEO told me, this is what every search firm, and it's obvious. And it really is a learning experience that's critical. And as you move up in the ranks, one of the women in the story started in her 20s at a local Y, wound up on the board of Stanford. Through those relationships, she met someone who put her on her first private company board, and now she's on tons of boards and leads them, et cetera. So on the right boards, although I work with a small organization and it's an all CEO board. The budget's $3 million, but everyone gives a minimum of 6 figures, and it's an all CEO board. If you are on a board with the right people and do a really good job, this is a valuable opportunity. So I will stop at this. I will say that everyone in this room brings incredible value on privacy, on security, legal, strategy, risk management. Think about your superpowers, what you bring to the table, and you should do this. You should absolutely do it. It's a transformational experience for everyone I know who's done it. So I will cut it there because Sheila has a lot to tell us.
Thanks, Alice. And I can echo that. When I spoke with Alice on the phone, the second question she asked me was what board I was on and what my passion was. Thank you for that. And one thing I would add to that is when I was looking for a non-for-profit board to join, I realized that it's not your personal interest, it's going to be the interest of the community or interest of the board that you have to focus on. So find a board that you're very passionate about, because there are lots of challenges and lots of help that non-for-profits need. So you have to be very passionate about what the cause is. So now let's kind of move to Sheila. I come from the accounting world, and when Sarbanes-Oxley came, they decided, there has to be a financial expert on the board. And I know most of the people in here are either privacy or, like myself, security. And when I think about joining a for-profit board, I always ask myself, what value can I add? And I recently wrote an article about, I think privacy and security should be on the boards because that's a new emerging topic as well. So I know that's something that we all probably in this room have in common about what value can we add. But if you can go into a little bit more depth on corporate boards and maybe the responsibilities that we would have.
I will. Can you remind me again how much time I have?
You have 10 to 15 minutes.
Okay, I have a lot of information to go through very quick with you then. Alice and I could do this on separate sessions for sure, and we're packing it all into one. So forgive me if I talk really fast, but I absolutely want to make sure that we have time left for your guys' questions. So absolutely go for the nonprofit board journey. I never want women to stop doing their charitable work. I just would like you to be paid for it. So other boards that you might want to think about, the media loves to focus on the Fortune 500 boards, and that's where you're going to see all the stats. And it's not the big picture. They're not the only game in town, right? So make sure that you remember that there's also these smaller public boards, also privately held company boards, and advisory boards. Advisory boards can mean many different things. It could be for a startup. It could be an advisory board for a very large company. Walmart has an advisory board. We're not a search firm, but we do get in a lot of board openings. And one of the board openings we got in was for the diversity advisory board for Toyota. And they paid $100,000 and they gave you a car. Not a bad shtick, right? So don't forget about the advisory boards. They're always a really great place to start. So, all right, so let's talk about, the job and responsibilities. And I'm so sorry I have these in front of me, but I have shiny object syndrome. So if I see something, I'll forget what I was talking about, or I'll get sidetracked. So I just at least have to have these. Plus I've got 10 minutes, I gotta go. All right, so responsibilities of a director, first and foremost, is to hire, evaluate, and if necessary, fire the CEO. It's to bring on other board directors. It is certainly to make sure that they're in compliance with, all of the different regulations that they have going on. Of course, overseeing the financial performance, overseeing strategy. So it is, eyes in, hands out, right? Because you are not management. You're not the CEO. Then being an effective board member, just as much as you talked about with the nonprofits, pretty much the same. So I'm not going to go into that a lot. You want to make sure you're getting along with your fellow board members, and you definitely need to be prepared. These are in addition to what she had said. Sometimes it's a lot to read through those board packets before the meeting, but I'm pretty sure we've all been in meetings where people haven't been prepared, and it's a little bit annoying. And then, of course, if that company goes into crisis mode, you're probably going to have to be there in triple time. So just keep that in mind if you have a job, right? So the risks of serving, of course, you want to make sure that the board always has D&O insurance, directors and officers insurance. Your reputation will never be covered by insurance. So make sure that no matter what kind of board you're getting on, that you are really doing due diligence. And Alice had talked about knowing who the other board members are, and the CEO. Absolutely know who the audit company is. Check out the company thoroughly. Just because somebody asked you to be on a board does not mean you should go on that board. You need to do your due diligence. And keep in mind too that if the price does sink, you might be sued. So, it's going to be covered under D&O insurance as long as you are performing your due diligence or your duties of care. But again, remember the reputation ones. The time commitment of serving is, the average for what NACD puts out, the National Association of Corporate Directors, is that for a corporate board, on average, it's 250 to 300 hours per year. And, I've had directors tell me that that's really high. And then for private boards, it can be more, but most likely it's going to be less. These are the things that you're finding out in the interview process for sure. But again, it's just all part of doing your due diligence. So compensation, because I know that's always of interest to everybody, right? So for time's sake, we're just going to say that the public boards, you can find that information online in their proxy. All right, all of that is right there for you. Private boards really will range, and because they're private, we don't really know what they're paying their directors all the time. But it could be anywhere from, they're giving their board members, at a smaller board, it might be $5,000, retainer with some equity, or it could go up The big private companies will definitely mirror the public companies, which, could be a lot of money, like $500,000, 250,000, and that would include both cash and stock. Just remember, you have to pay taxes on that. So that should definitely not be the only reason why you want to be on a board, is for the compensation. And let's see, so why pursue board service besides the compensation? Of course, it's definitely an intellectual challenge. You're at the table with extremely smart people. And, if you are still in your career, it definitely can be a big boost for your career as well. And you're learning all the time, of course. It's a great resume and reputation builder as well. It's just everybody's motivation is always going to be different, but what we hear all the time is that no matter what they're getting, they're giving, they're definitely getting more out of it. So definitely worth the time. So the different skills that we're seeing that are needed is definitely that risk. I mean, so we've gotten in probably 130 different board openings now in the last couple of years, which is amazing. So I feel like I have a really good pulse on what boards are looking for. And thank goodness it isn't just the financial expert anymore. And that really started to shift pretty dramatically 5-7 years ago. I can't believe I've been doing this for 15 years. It's really crazy. I think I started when I was 25, right? Yeah. No, I didn't. And so, what was I seeing? Shiny object, right? Just right there. What was I talking about? Oh, right, skill set. Thank you. That was a test to make sure you guys were listening. So technology is definite. So yes, it's changed a lot in the last 5 to 7 years, especially in the last 3 years, which is really great news for all of us that are not a financial expert, right? So there certainly are boards that are looking for them. They need them on their board for sure, but they don't need a table full of them anymore. So technology, risk management, HR, talent management, operations. I mean, we've seen it all. Sales and marketing, M&A experience. We've had, companies come to us that are looking for, someone with retail experience that's a digital disruptor. Engineering technology specialists. So it's really all across the board. So don't let that hold you back. All right, what am I forgetting?
So, a question that I think a lot of us probably may have is, how do we find out about board openings? I know going to somebody like you, but what are some other ways? You know what? You can
hear about board openings through so many different services these days. And, sign up to be a part of a database or whatever, but it's just, there's no easy way to the boardroom. Mm-hmm. It's all about networking, and you need to make sure that you have your board portfolio put together, that professional profile, that board bio, that really highlight your skills and background for board positioning. And what I'm really big on is working with our members on the networking piece of it. So, it's really reaching out to your network and those influencers and connectors. And, a lot of times we're so focused on our current network that we forget that we have people that we, how many times you've run into Joe that you've known for 20 years and you haven't talked to him in 5, right? So it's really important to make sure that you're re-engaging with people. And, we as women, we are such great networkers. Really, we are, but we are not good at using our network. We're not good for asking for help. It's like, oh my gosh, what can I do for you? What can I do for you? And, what I've really learned too is that really digging in and figuring out, like if someone says, oh, the networking process isn't working for me, I'm like, let's see what you're doing wrong, because I know what does, right? I mean, we have so many of our members getting on boards through this networking process. And what I find really, so we'll do like a role play. I'll say, okay, well, what is it that you're saying to this person? And I found out that they're saying to them, oh my gosh, Sally, I'm really interested in getting onto a board, and I know you've been there and you've done that. So how did you do it? What advice do you have for me? And I'm like, that's what I'm here for. you come to me for that information. You go to your network ready, right? So there's a big difference from that conversation to them going to them with that elevator pitch of, hey Sally, I wanted to let you know I'm really interested in getting onto a corporate board, and I'm looking for small or mid-cap, private or public companies. Specifically, I'm looking for something in retail, hospitality, healthcare, and my skill set for board services, boom, boom, boom. And then you end it with, would love to know if there's anyone in your network that you can connect me to. Big difference between those two. So it is, but it's a process because we have to get over that fear of, not wanting to ask for help. And, and there's also the right way to reach out to people and when to reach out to them. And then you can't assume either that you've told them once and they're supposed to remember. So you have to maintain.
Great, thank you for that. So we constantly read there's a number of reasons why you need gender diversity on boards. It can be better decision making, understanding your consumer base better. I think the one that I read that was most powerful to me was it increases financial performance when you have a gender diverse board. So there was the Peterson Institute said, if you have 30% female leadership, it could add up to 6% points on your net margin. And McKinsey and Company actually said companies are 15% more likely to outperform their peers when they have gender diversity. So I'm going to ask you two questions, Alice and then Sheila. One, what's the biggest challenge or significant barrier to have female leadership? And then two, what do you feel that the number one reason should be, or one of your top reasons to have gender diversity on boards?
So, and I actually put an article at your tables called Better Boards, Better Governance. I think it's or a variation on that, because I wrote a chapter in a book on that too. But talking about the for-profit companies to begin with, because it's very clear cut in terms of company maximizing its potential financially and in terms of shareholder value. The average in the S&P 500, the average number, you would know this, average number of board members is 10.7. The average age is 63. It's going up, not down. That means the internet came on when they were 40. So in terms of technology savviness and that.
They're not, right.
There are fewer than, it's 18% are women, 15% are minority, and fewer than one per board. It's something like 6 or 6.7%, something like that. It's in the article. Are people who were born in a country other than the U.S. So think about that, and the fact that 3 billion people are entering the middle class in emerging markets, a massive market opportunity, that in Africa alone, consumer-facing industries will see an increase of $400 billion, that women make 75% of discretionary spending decisions worldwide. So these are massive market opportunities. In my mind, the role of a for-profit board, parallel to a nonprofit board, is to imagine this company's greater potential in the global marketplace. Well, to do that, if you've got a very homogeneous group of people, I don't care who they are if they're homogeneous, but basically you have old white men, that's the demographic, then, and with similar backgrounds, having grown up in the United States, similar backgrounds, how can a group like that, how can they possibly imagine a company's greater potential? And also given the lack of the internet and technology, and which is at the center of all of the big opportunities, not to mention security, privacy, etc. So imagine instead a board with people from a variety of different backgrounds, ages, genders, having grown up in different countries. They can still be running major companies, C-suite people, PhDs from MIT, all the qualifications that you want. But that kind of board, I would bet my money on in terms of imagining what's possible and even knowing what questions to ask. So I think it's, and as Avani said, all the data points to less fraud, less conflict of interest, higher ROI. I mean, all of the benefits are heavily documented now. McKinsey, Credit Suisse, you mentioned some. There are many studies now. Nonprofit board, just imagine similarly. So I've been working with nonprofit boards for 25 years. Here, talk about, yes.
You were also 15 when you started.
And boards had been extremely homogeneous. Now, sometimes it's better, sometimes it's not. But how can a nonprofit imagine that organization's greater potential and understand and maximize the revenue potential if they're all from the same group and the same background? And I facilitate retreats of nonprofit boards, and there were 2 weekends back to back, and in one I was doing the retreat, and then that a very homogeneous board, and it was an organization that was really struggling financially, and I threw out a variety of ideas of ways they could reach different segments of the population, and each time they were like, oh, no, they wouldn't be interested. Oh, no, that's not what we're about. All they could imagine were people exactly like themselves being served. And in fact, I didn't even understand how they would qualify for a 501c3 because it was such an exclusive group, and they saw themselves serving their group exclusively. The following weekend, I was facilitating a retreat, an education opportunity organization for boys of Latino and Latino and Black boys, and it was such a diverse group. I'm not talking in the obvious how people look, but there were highly successful business people, and there was a teacher from one of the schools. There was a white person who grew up from a guy who ran a company, very limited background, and education was his big opportunity. Every person in the room had a very unique and different and unexpected background. And as I threw out each issue, it was like a symphony of, well, we could do this, we could do that, and then, we brought it to a conclusion. But it was like, whoa, this is so rich, the thinking, the ideas, that, well, what about that? And it was just the opposite. So it's just, you've all been in groups where everyone's similar, or there's more variety in backgrounds, and you know that the richness of the vision, the ideas, understanding risk, the mitigating risk is a big issue. So I think it's very clear. Oh, and what's the problem? This is being taped.
I'm dying over here to say something.
Okay, you go next, but
okay.
I
can't
the
not
honest
talk
to
for
God
a long
truth.
time. I just can't.
People who are in power, why would they want to relinquish it?
Right, okay.
Especially if it's financially beneficial. That's what it comes down to, in my mind.
Right, okay, so I'm going to totally sidetrack this because on that note, right, and I'm going off, and I'm going to anyway. So today, I'm flying here, and in first class because it was a really discounted ticket, by the way, and not that I have to make any excuses for that, but it's 10 people, 9 white dudes and me, right? This is why they're not giving up those board seats. And so I don't ever talk about the woe is us. I'm like, get off your butt. I use a different word, but we're being and do the work, right? Because you are qualified, you are good enough, and they're looking for you. So have that confidence and stop waiting to check every single box before you go for it. Because not only is these white dudes sitting there, white privilege is an issue, no matter how you look at it, so many ways till tomorrow, and just get up and do the work, because they're not going to give those seats up. You have to go get them.
And it's not to say that old white guys shouldn't be on boards, but 2 out of the 11 or something like that.
They don't know technology.
It's the homogeneity.
Right?
But they can bring something
yes.
else.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so a couple.
Can I ask you a question? So yeah, they'll get up out of our seats and go get them. But there's probably a lot of people here that don't know where to start.
Right, exactly.
Help us think about where we'd start, or if we want to be better prepared for board service, what can we do?
Thank you.
What are some actionable things that you all think we can do now?
Right, okay, so know why you want to serve, right? And I have some postcards here, by the way, that have these 10 tips on here. Know why you want to serve, create a plan, and you have those board documents that I talked about, that board bio, that professional profile that highlight your background for board positioning. so that you really do know your skill set and that you can articulate that to your network. Your personal brand is key. Of course, make sure you're always doing a bang-up job wherever you're at, because you're being watched all the time. And if you're on those nonprofit boards, you take a leadership role and you show up, because we know too many times that doesn't happen. So always bring your A game, educate yourself. I'm not saying that, because women love to do this. They're like, oh my God, I think I should go get another degree. I think I should go and become board certified. And I'm not ready. And I'm like, yes, you are. You're good. Like, how many of those board openings do you think that have come to us that have said, we're looking for a board director who's certified? Zero, right? So none of them are looking for that. So don't go and you don't have to go get certified. And not today, maybe in 2 years, I don't know. But there's plenty of stuff that you can Google, read about, webinars, all of that information on what it means to be a board director. And if you have no board experience, besides those nonprofit boards, if you have no experience, consider hospital board, government boards, university boards. And if you know entrepreneurs and they need to start an advisory board, tell them to start an advisory board and put you on. There's a really great book by a woman here in DC Marissa Levins, it's called Built to Scale. And she gives you step-by-step, how to create an advisory board for your company. You read it, you're the expert, that's great. You know what, be in it for the long haul. There's no quick and easy way to the boardroom. So like all those databases out there with the board openings, I tell people all the time not to join women in the boardroom because we get in all those board openings, because it's really icing on the cake. My whole goal is to help them do this work that it takes to put themselves forward. And of course, then the networking, which I talked in depth more about.
I think it's really interesting that you talked about government boards. Someone recently told me I live in Orlando, and I looked at the city of Orlando, and they had 67 board openings. And there was one for IT audit, which is exactly what I do. And then when I submitted it, they said I was the first person to apply in 12 months.
Wow.
So, it's probably an easy way to get into that. I may be the IT audit board member.
Yeah.
So before I open it up, I'm going to ask you a personal question. So I got my MBA at Wharton Business School, and I'm not going to say who this was because everybody knows who this person is, but we were taken out to a roundtable discussion, and I asked this person, what's the number one advice that you could give a woman? I was probably late 20s, early 30s, about serving on a corporate board, and he said, just don't ever get pregnant. So the good thing about Wharton Business School is 50% are female and 50% are male. So I guess what are you seeing with some of the people that you work with of like the influence of motherhood or maternity? I have young children myself, but that was...
I'm still in shock. Okay.
So what kind of advice, I didn't have children at that time, but it was a shock to me as, being there, a very influential person saying that.
You're asking me what kind of advice I would give mothers?
Or just...
The subject doesn't come up.
Okay. That's great.
Yeah, that's why I'm like, what?
Yeah.
Why would that discussion happen? No, be persistent, be in it for the long haul, and do the work. And you know what? Sometimes you just got to take it step by step. And
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
there's so many unconscious biases.
Sure.
It's a problem. One of the things I love about nonprofit boards is that most of the time, almost all of the time, women can move into leadership positions. Most of the time, for a nonprofit board, if you're willing to say, who's going to do this, who's going to do that, I will. And if you love it, I find the busiest people, if you love what they're doing and feel you can be useful, you will wind up saying, I'll help with that. And before you know it, you're helping with things and you wind up in a leadership role and you can wind up as chair of the board. And that's an extraordinary opportunity to develop yourself, to show what you can do, to have that sense of competence and translate that into your work and potentially for-profit boards. So
great.
it's it's the magic of nonprofit boards.
It's wonderful.
They're, the barriers are far fewer.
Great. So we have about, I think, a good 20 minutes. Do we have questions? Great. Do we have someone who?
Do you want to take this mic?
I have it.
I believe it was mentioned earlier that you had said it's more important or it's best or needed to be on a nonprofit board before a corporation board or a for-profit board. Is that, did I hear that right? And if so, why is that important?
So when the publisher for directors and boards asked me to write an article about this, and it's the one called Amassing Your Governance Capital. He said, if you're on a nonprofit board, then can you go onto a for-profit board, or how important is it? And I interviewed many executive search firm people who do for-profit board placement, chairs and CEOs of public company boards. And they basically said, if you're on a nonprofit board, there's no promise or reason to think you would wind up on a for-profit board. It depends on the trajectory. As I said, the opening anecdote I tell is of a woman who did start with a local Y and moved her way up the ladder and was on the Stanford University board. And that is, as Sheila said, universities, hospitals, where you meet people usually who could, if they're impressed, they can provide access to invitations to for-profit boards. But what was 100% clear with everybody, and then since then I've sort of followed it and looked at bios of people on for-profit boards, there is not a single for-profit board member, they said, who has not had nonprofit board experience. And it really is a learning and development experience and opportunity. And they did say that's not what's going to get you a seat on a for-profit board, but it will come up. Recommendations, and as Sheila said, whatever you do, do well, of course, but we do because we're women. And I'm a little biased there. The word of mouth and what people think, and certainly about your performance on a nonprofit board, that does come up. But one of the CEO and chairs said to me, it's also important to them, to companies, that all of their board members are involved in their communities, one way or another. It brings a richer understanding of needs and challenges and issues in the world, and shows support and interest. If you want to take that on, and then I want to say something else. Yeah.
Yep. Okay, so you don't have to get onto a nonprofit board to get onto a corporate board, right? I hear you when you say that all do, and I don't know that I necessarily agree with that, and I'm not saying I disagree either. I just have not done that research. But what I am asked all the time is serving on a nonprofit board going to help me get into the boardroom, corporate boardroom? And I say, well, maybe. And the reason why is because if it is a well-run board, so that you're learning good corporate governance, and make sure that it's a large nonprofit board, make sure there's men at the table, because it's a networking opportunity. Make sure, of course, that you're passionate about it. And, first, I should have said, I never want women to stop doing their charitable work, because sometimes when I go through this list, I get that email, right? And I'm not saying I want women to stop doing their charitable work. That's not it. But again, take that leadership role. Know those expectations that you talked about, that give and the get. Also your time commitment. Do they want you there for 5 hours a month or 5 hours a week, 1 year or 5 years? Those are my goals.
And I want to add something that ties with all of this. The second book I wrote, and you've got a brochure about, you have actually the book, A Better World, Inc., How Companies Profit by Solving Global Problems Where Governments Cannot. I wrote it before this administration, even then, but okay, sorry, we're in DC, it's hard not to. And so it's filled with dozens of case studies of companies and who are leading the way in terms of ESG, environment, social, and governance, sustainability, et cetera. And it makes it very clear that companies do have an opportunity to profit and grow value by solving today's most compelling challenges, environmental, social, and economic. And for every threat, poverty, a threat to companies and their prosperity and success, climate, ecosystems loss, education, healthcare, there's a chapter on each. These are all threats not only to humanity, but to prosperity and company success. But every one of them is an opportunity. Like in your field, which is really hot, is cybersecurity, privacy, the greatest threat, but it means for companies that find solutions, innovative solutions, the greatest opportunity to make money, and that provides an opportunity for you. The companies that were successful in maximizing their potential financially by finding innovative solutions did three things well. The board understood this, so it's at the board level. They partner with nonprofits that bring credibility and expertise and relationships in remote communities where companies don't understand but want to. And they are effective at stakeholder engagement. So you bring valuable skills to the table, and I think understanding that it really is about the global marketplace in today's and tomorrow's world, and innovation, this is really what board governance is about, certainly in for-profits, but also nonprofits.
Some other questions?
Thank you. I'm Lauren Shai. I'm a member of our Women Leading Privacy Advisory Board. So first, thank you for your time and your insights, and in Avani's case, your horrifying story. I have, I think, a personal experience that might benefit the room, and it also touches on Patrice's question about action items. Alice, you mentioned broader volunteerism efforts and nonprofit board membership as perhaps a component or extension of that. How many people in the room volunteer either currently or in the past, and no judgments if you don't raise your hand, but how many of you do actually volunteer and donate your time perhaps in your local communities? School PTA, anything? Okay, a lot of people. I also volunteer in my local community for a nonprofit, and I approached them about their board and whether there was an opportunity to be a board member there after about a year of volunteering. One, they were thrilled to know that I was interested, right? They don't know unless you approach them and tell them that you have an interest. And two, while a board position did not materialize, it allowed me to practice some of the things that Sheila had mentioned, which is why I'm interested in being on a board, why I think I would be a good board member with an organization that I know. So I would really encourage people to think about, when you go home in the coming weeks and months, approach those organizations and ask them and go through your pitch and get the experience. It will benefit you regardless of whether a position materializes.
Most nonprofits are always on the lookout for good candidates. Approach them, ask them. So that's why I say ask people when you meet them what they're doing, and you will hear about things. There are also online matching services, I think through LinkedIn, through, what's wrong with me? They're California-based.
CalSTRS?
No, I'm for nonprofit, nonprofit board lists. I'm sorry? I don't think BoardSource does that, but it's a board matching, it's a nonprofit matching service. I'll think of it. I'm sorry, I can't believe I'm not thinking of it. Volunteer match, okay.
Yeah.
So anyhow, and so you can learn about nonprofits that are looking. I would caution you extremely, the percentage of successful matches, to me, if it's 70%, that's a disaster, because it means 30 out of 100 people wanted to do something and wound up in their first board meeting saying, oops, this is not what I had in mind. And the CEO and board chair like, I don't think this person's going to be what we need. And to me, that's horrible. And then that person tells other people, don't do it. It is a matter of really learning and understanding what's going on at the organization. Again, what they're trying to accomplish, what their revenue model is, who's on the board, what their challenges and opportunities are, and what they need you to do. So use those for lists of ideas, but you do need to do more due diligence. But I think ideally through people you know, and organizations you know, and if you asked 5 organizations, Lauren, I'll bet at least one would be begging you. Most nonprofits are, as I work with candidates, there's not a nonprofit that's closed to me if I'm going to introduce someone that meets what they need. That's my job, is to figure out. So they're all looking, and you guys bring a lot to the table. So it's just finding the right match. Just be thoughtful and purposeful.
Is that working? I don't know if it is.
Sorry.
I can speak really loud.
Here in the back.
Is everything working? Somebody use the camera.
Hello? Okay. So, a little different question. I had the great opportunity to be on a board for 2 years as a treasurer, so treasurer-elect, treasurer the second year. And then immediately after that, it was quite exhausting, so I didn't really understand.
Are you talking nonprofit?
Yes, nonprofit. How much work there was to be done, and I was happy to do it, but, you know, I had really young kids, and everybody gets that here, right? Most people do. So, and they immediately came back and said, okay, well, we're nominating you. You've been nominated for president-elect.
Lucky you.
Yes. And it just, for a myriad of reasons, personal, and, you know, I just didn't feel like, because I had 2 years on the board as a treasurer, that I really still had a good grasp of the operations. And I really kind of wanted to learn more in a different role as well, maybe a community role or communications or what have you, before I stepped into that president role. And so I respectfully declined it, and then, you know, was actively trying to pursue something else. And it kind of hurt me. And so my question is there some other way I should have handled that? Is there, you know, in the course of being on the board, you know, I know there's some natural progression. It doesn't necessarily mean that I want to go to the top or I want to do everything on that board. Some people do. But, you know, I guess it just really disappointed me that it seemed like I didn't take that next step, and they, you know, wouldn't allow me to do anything else after that.
At another organization or at this?
At this non-for-profit, yeah.
So it was a national one? A
Yes.
national nonprofit? Was it all women?
Okay.
Sorry, but, yeah.
I just didn't know if that was, if I did something, you know, was there some other expectation I could have said, or,
I mean, every organization is different. It's perfectly reasonable to say, I mean, chair of a board, I have such respect for people who do that. It is a massive
Yeah.
commitment. I mean, I've been asked and I haven't done, it is massive commitment. And I've done other leadership roles. And I've built and run social enterprises, very successful ones. So, and I was a good CEO, but it's humbling when you realize that you can't maximize an organization's potential without a great board. And it's also the case that if you have a great CEO but not a good board, you're not going to achieve that organization's greater potential. But if you have a great chair and a weak CEO, that can be fixed. I mean, the chair really has the greatest opportunity to really make or break a nonprofit in so many ways. So it's a huge responsibility. The fact that you didn't take it should not, you know, but every culture and group of people is different. It's group dynamics, but no. And if you were treasurer, good for you. That's
not that it
an important
couldn't
role.
have happened with men in the room, but it's just unfortunate that these things still happen.
Right.
Well, if you don't talk about it, right, it's
Yeah.
not going to go anywhere. I always say, listen, if you're not
Well,
a woman
that's
who helps other women, you're not welcome at women in the
diversity.
boardroom.
That's diversity, too.
Yeah.
So thanks again. I echo your comments earlier. It's been a really great conversation. I have sort of maybe a different way in. I started my own nonprofit because there was a need in the community in the area that I was interested in serving. And so I am the chair, but it's teeny tiny. And we've had some grants and we've grown. But I'm wondering if you could talk about people you may have seen in their progress from like their own startup nonprofit to joining more national and bigger organizations. Because my experience, I don't have mentors randomly that I've worked with and sponsors and people who've helped me, but it's all kind of been make it up as I go along. And it would be interesting to know, how do you bridge from that kind of scenario to one where you're on a national board?
So you're also.
In the nonprofit space.
Is there any paid staff, or you do it all?
We do it all. We have a grant
Okay.
that's been paying some of our board and volunteer,
Yeah.
or formerly volunteer members
Yeah.
to do some of the deliverables of the grants.
That's tough. All volunteer organizations are really tough, and often can't get to at the next level until that happens, until there's a paid executive director. But doing incredibly important work. It's the same as anyone else in this room, and what Sheila said with regard to for-profit boards, same with nonprofits. Think about, my grandchildren call them superpowers. Think about what you're really good at. You're clearly entrepreneurial, innovative, a problem solver, understanding certain issues and needs in the community. So understand that's just one aspect of you that I think is kind of apparent from what you've done. For each of you, think about what strengths you bring to the table and how you've demonstrated them, because that's the conversation Sheila was talking about. This is what I'm good at, and this is what I can tell you about what I've done, so that you'll understand that. And then in exploring organizations through conversations, organizations you read about in the paper, or online, I should say, look at who's on the board, look at what they do, look at their revenue model by looking at their 990s through GuideStar, and think about, gee, do I think I could potentially be useful? And then approach them.
We'll take one more question. All the way down.
Thank you so much. This has just been a great conversation. You briefly touched on the time commitment. Can you elaborate a little bit more about what to expect of trying to insert yourself into board positions while still trying to manage a full-time career and a family?
Who are you asking?
Both.
Both.
Yeah.
Well, first of all, I have really bad allergies. I'm not sick, by the way, so if you want to talk to me afterwards, I'm not sick. There's just no such thing as balance, I don't think, right? One day you're going to have 90-10, and the next day you're going to have 40-60, and 10-90 the next day. So we all get done what we want to get done. That's my answer.
That sounds like a tweet.
And a brilliant
Can you hear me?
tweet at that.
Roning Sheila?
Yeah.
Right.
Can I just comment on that a little bit? So I work for a bank in Wilmington, Delaware.
Where are we? Where is the question? Oh, okay.
Here. I just wanted to
Yeah.
comment on this question because it's very difficult to find time to do all of these things. I was the chairman of board of communities and schools of Delaware for 4 years, and it's a lot of work. But lots of times your employer will allow you time to do that. Most of my board meetings were during the day, my executive meetings were during the day, and provided I got my work done, that was, it was encouraged actually by my employer to do that.
Always make sure that you talk to your employer before you start going for that board seat, to make sure it's okay. Because there's nothing worse than being offered a board seat and then you go back to your employer and they're like, yeah, you can't. And that is really bad for your brand.
And while you do it, you can ask them too about matching funds and, or if it's not a formal policy, if they would potentially provide financial support to organizations where you're involved on the board.
I know the Big Four recently in their benefit package says that they'll pay for your board seat, so that whatever financial funds are.
No, we're talking about nonprofits. You cannot pay for your
Correct,
corporate board seat, right?
Yeah, non-for-profit, yeah. So actually, let's kind of to wrap it up, maybe if I can ask both Sheila and Alice, what are your final words that you would give us women today?
There's so many.
Advice?
Right, where do we begin? Obviously I'll start because I just started talking, but, so sorry about that. Have a plan, have some patience. There's no easy way to that corporate boardroom, but you're good enough. Go get it.
I like the go get it theme, and I would say that. And time management is a massive.
Yeah.
You know, I raise children working full time. I have grandchildren. I'm very, very involved. You know, and two of my daughters have children, and and they work full time. So it's one at a law firm. So that's anyhow.
Yeah.
It's a lot. So we know that. I think, as I said earlier, nonprofit board service is one of the most incredible opportunities of a lifetime to do something meaningful, but to grow and develop personally, and it is absolutely transformational for people. Most importantly, make sure it's a good fit, take the time that it takes to do that, meet the people on the board, go on site visits, whatever it takes. And in the meantime, in terms of exploring, start asking people. You will be so surprised how many people are serving on nonprofit boards and have a lot to say. And if you're in this room, you're a curious person because you're a highly accomplished person. It's the journey itself is at least half the fun. You will learn so much about what's out there. You will learn about yourself. And, you know, the reason I think it's important when I work with candidates, this journey, is because this is not what they do full-time. How could they possibly imagine all of the possibilities? And I've worked with hundreds and hundreds of nonprofits, but every month I come across and meet with and visit with a nonprofit, and I think, who would imagine that you exist where you combine this and that approach to solve this or that problem? No one could even imagine it. So you'll be surprised at what's out there, and you will find something if you really want to look for it. You absolutely will.
So Avani, if you don't mind, can I ask one last question before we adjourn and we thank everyone? You said have a plan, and you talked about some really inspiring things that we can do as we look for not-for-profit opportunities. But where do you go to start your plan? Are there any resources or things that you can tell people about where you can see what kind of a plan you need to have, whether you're 20, 30, 40, or 50 years old, you want to be on a board someday? Where do you start that plan?
Well, it would depend if it's a for-profit or a nonprofit, right? So do you know where nonprofits would go?
Well, where would you go to create a plan? I think, like with anything, read, learn about the issues you care about organizations. Definitely, as Lauren said, I mean, everyone in this room is volunteering in some capacity. I've always seen that your volunteer career as parallel to your work career, and it's a career path. I did career counseling a long time ago, and it's a career path, and you learn about yourself with each engagement, what you like and what you don't like, and you develop different skill sets. And one of the other things I love about volunteering in nonprofit board service is you work with people, usually, hopefully, from very different backgrounds on a mission that you're all very passionate about. So you get to work with people you might not meet or know in other parts of your life, and that's really fabulous too.
Is there anything maybe more specific that we can offer to people as a resource?
Right. Okay, so obviously for corporate boards, come to Women in the Boardroom. I would Google the nonprofit one, right? I can't imagine that it's really going to be that much. I mean, you do have to figure out what is it that you're interested in. What are you good at? It's not as complicated as the question, right?
And my answer to that is, I'm sorry, I'm not a self-promoting kind of person to be, really, but my first book addresses that first question. It's called Leveraging Goodwill, Strengthening Nonprofits by Engaging Businesses, and it is about business people trying to find the right nonprofit board match. It's about the role of nonprofit boards, building better boards. So it's called Leveraging Goodwill. It's on Amazon. And this book, which was just amazing to research and write, is a great background for both nonprofit and for-profit boards. And it's easy to read. I was telling Avani, who said she's about to read it, if you read the first chapter and last chapter, it tells you the whole story. And then the inside chapters, one's on climate, one's on human rights, which includes privacy and privacy issues and security issues. and that and trafficking, a whole mix of things. Education, healthcare, they're different chapters on different issues, so you can pick and choose and read them in whatever order you like. But I think both of those would be and all the companies I write about have partnerships with nonprofits, so it will help you understand a lot of the realm of nonprofits, and that when you're on nonprofit boards, partnering with your company, there are really rich opportunities that are win-wins.
And she has a discount code up here. So-
Yes,
Yeah.
my distributor gave a discount of 35%, which is unbelievable. Here, a woman, I didn't know to ask, and then someone I know said, well, you should push them. I was like, so I did, and I got it, but this is 2 years later. Okay, anyhow, so there's a discount code.
Well, thank you so much for your insights, and thanks for Women Leading Privacy for setting this up. I think it was the first time of having a session like this, and also thank you everyone for having wonderful questions. I know both of you will stay up here for a little bit. I think the next session in here is not for 20 minutes, so if you have any questions, please come up, and thank you again, everyone.